21st February 1878. The mother was born as Blanche Rachel Mira Alfassa in a bourgeois family in Paris. From her earliest childhood, Mira was beyond the ordinary human consciousness. As a child of 3, she was conscious, and her conscious inner life began when she was only 5 years old. Little Mira would sit in a small armchair, specially made for her, and feel a light and force above her head, penetrating her brain and gradually shaping her life. And it was in these very early years of her life that Mira began to seek for a way to unify the contradictory will and divergent parts of her being around her psychic center, which was already well developed. Between the age of 11 and 13, a series of psychic and spiritual experiences revealed to Mira not only the existence of God, but of man's possibility to unify with him, of manifesting him upon earth in a life divine. It was during this period, when she first began to learn occultism, that she experienced a series of visions. She knew nothing of India then. In one of the visions, she saw a glorious being with a golden bronze hue. He had a rather sharp profile, an unruly beard, and long hair. He wore a dhoti with one end of it thrown over his shoulder and his arms. His chest and his feet were bare. In this vision, she did something she had never done physically. She prostrated before him in the Hindu manner. She knew her vision to be premonitory, and that one day something like it would happen. It remained in the background of her consciousness, not active, but constantly present. As Mira's inner and outer development proceeded, the spiritual and psychic relation with this being became more and more clear and frequent. And although she knew little of Indian philosophies and religions at that time, she was led to call him Krishna, and henceforth she was aware that it was with him, whom she knew she would meet on earth one day, that her divine work was to be done.
On the night of 31st March 1910, around 11, Sri Aurobindo finally boarded the steamship Jubilee at Chandapal Ghat, Calcutta. He was accompanied by Bijoy Nag. The next morning, the Jubilee steamed out of Calcutta harbour and entered the open sea. 4 days later, on Monday, the 4th of April, about 4 p.m., the Jubilee anchored in Pondicherry harbour. After tea on board the ship, Sri Aurobindo and Bijoy were escorted from the beach to Shankar Chettiar's house at Rue des Commentis. Kalve Shankar Chettiar was a wealthy and important citizen of Pondicherry, who had generously made his house available for Sri Aurobindo. Suresh, also known as Moni, whom Sri Aurobindo had chosen to precede him, had reached Pondicherry 4 days earlier. His task was to make the necessary arrangements for Sri Aurobindo's stay, with the help of the Tamil freedom fighters, the Deshabandhus from Madras Presidency, who had settled in Pondicherry. Prominent among them were VVS Iyer, Subramanya Bharati, Srinivasachari, Tirumalachari, Rangachari, Kasturi, Krishnaswamy, and others. They were known as the India Group, as one of their open activities was the publication of the popular Tamil journal India, with Subramanya Bharati as editor. The India office was situated on Rue Valdavour. Together, they had succeeded in persuading Shankar Chettiar to offer his house for Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo, Bijoy Nag, and Suresh Chandra Chakravarti were lodged on the second floor of this house, where they stayed until October.
In Paris, at the age of 8, Meera began to draw. By the age of 10, she had already learnt the various techniques of colour painting, and at 15 she joined the Académie Julian, the only noted school in Paris which admitted women artists. The youngest in class, she devoted the full 8 hours to her studies. Meera was an extraordinary girl. Here are some of her paintings. Interior with bright vases. A musician's room. The studio of an artist. A room in a castle. A friend's garden. A lady on a staircase. Interior of a library. Studies of living models. And finally, portrait of a loving friend. This lady, Madame Valentine, was Meera's closest friend during her days at the Académie. By the time Meera graduated from art school, she had also mastered many other fine arts, such as singing, instrumental music, dancing, acting, and recitation. But far more crucial to her was her inner journey, for she had attained a conscious and constant union with the Divine Presence, all alone, without any external help. Imbibing the essence of Swami Vivekananda's Raj Yoga, Meera gained in a few months what otherwise could have taken years. It so happened that soon afterwards, an Indian yogi gave her a translation of the Bhagavad Gita, and with it he gave the advice, take Krishna as the symbol of the immanent divine, the divine within you. And in just a few months, she had realized that spiritual truth. The child of 13 who had dreamt extraordinary dreams, the child who had felt the burden of the world's pain and would have annihilated it with her healing touch, the child who had suffered uncomplainingly the companionship of the man of sorrows, the child who could negotiate a passage across the mysterious occult worlds, the child who had been quarried out of the divine and who offered herself completely to the divine, the child now grew into a radiant young woman. In her early 20s, Meera married the artist Henri Morisset. motherhood became Meera, and she was the Madonna with the child. She used to tell her son, from the time he was just a little boy, how she had come to this world with a special mission. Meera's outer existence had already entered a new phase, and deep in her being there reigned a calm nothing could ruffle.
In course of time, Meera was deeply involved with a spiritual organization called Groupe Cosmique, the Cosmic Movement. Its founders, Max and Alma Theon, were both powerful adepts in occultism. Based in Tlemcen, Algeria, they published a monthly journal, Revue Cosmique, to convey their message to the world. The key position in the Paris chapter of their group was held by Meera, who also played a central role in the publication of the review. In 1906 and the following year, Meera had been to Tlemcen to study occultism under the instruction of Max and Alma Theon, who recognized in her an initiate of the highest order. During her stay, they helped her become an accomplished occultist in her own right. In 1910, Meera came to know that a renowned yogi, Aurobindo Ghosh, was living in Pondicherry and decided to meet him when an opportunity arose. Long before their actual meeting, Meera was already in inner contact with Sri Aurobindo, though in her visions she knew him not as Sri Aurobindo but as Krishna, from whom she would receive his constant guidance. The momentous meeting of Meera and Sri Aurobindo took place on Sunday the 29th of March 1914.
In October 1910, Sri Aurobindo moved to Sundar Chetty's house on Rue du Pavillon in the French quarters in the southern part of the town. It was a rented house. Just before shifting to this house, on 30th of September, Mrinalini Devi's cousin Shorin Bose came over from Calcutta and joined Sri Aurobindo's household. Now there were 3 young men around Sri Aurobindo, Moni, Bijoy and Shorin.
Are, Nolini, you?
Once one comes in contact with Aurobindo Babu, is it possible to remain far from him? It became impossible for me to stay back. And so, here I am.
Nolini, what is the latest news on the Karma Yogin sedition case against Aurobindo Babu?
Oh, Karma Yogin case. There is a dramatic reversal of the situation.
What is that?
The appeal against the order of the Chief Presidency Magistrate will be heard in this month, in November, in the Calcutta High Court. Everybody is expecting a favorable verdict.
Go in and give Aurobindo Babu this good news.
In April 1911, Sri Aurobindo moved from Sundar Chetty's house to Raghavan House in Rue Saint-Louis.
Moni, Nolini, Thiru Aravinda has written a very interesting letter to the Hindu. Have you read it?
No, Mr. Rangachari. Could you please read it out to us?
Sure. He says, I find myself besieged by devotees who insist on seeing me whether I will or not. They have crossed all India to see me, from the Karachi waters, from the rivers of the Punjab, whence they do not come. They wish to stand at a distance and get mukti by gazing on my face. Or they will sit at my feet, live with me wherever I am, or follow me to whatever lands. They clamber up onto my windows to see me, or loiter and write letters from neighboring police stations. I wish to inform all future pilgrims of this kind that their journey will be in vain. I suppose now you understand who these devotees are.
Who else? Obviously the British CID agents.
Yes. In June, Tamil revolutionaries assassinated Mr. Ash, the collector of Tirunelveli district. The British CID soon established a link between Pondicherry and the crime. So, the contingent of the British CID agents in Pondicherry was reinforced. They have set up a regular station here in Pondicherry with a rented house, and several of them are permanently stationed here.
Yes, we have seen some of them sitting on the pavement of our house and nearby corners.
Usually in groups of 3 or 4.
Correct. The contingent actually consists of 55 officers and men, all employed to keep a watch over 40 of our suspects. And Tiruravinder and U4 are listed as Class B and hence shadowed closely throughout day and night. Mr. Iyer, Bharati and Srinivasa, what has happened?
The CID cannot find anything useful to them about Thiru Aurobindo. He rarely goes out of his house, and we hardly talk about him outside, and never to strangers.
This is why, frustrated by our silence, they have cooked up a sinister conspiracy in league with the locals who are in their pay.
One of these conspirators is the local politician Nandagopal Chetty.
Your football friends in the Circle Sportive have asked us to convey this information to you so that you can pass it to Thiru Aurobindo.
It's Nandagopal. He is in charge of the plot to kidnap Thiru Aurobindo.
What? Kidnap him?
Yes, and that too tonight. Nandagopal's team are going to kidnap and smuggle him out of the French limits. There, the British will arrest him on some trumped up charges.
Nandagopal has gundas in his pay who are quite capable of such things.
So be alert.
But none of the conspirators appeared at Sri Aurobindo's house. That very day, hearing of a warrant of arrest being issued against him by the French government, Nandagopal ran away to Madras.
Mani, where is Thiru Aurobindo?
In his room.
Oh, all 4 of you have come together? What happened, Mr. Iyer?
This morning, a tin was discovered by my maid when she went to the well in my backyard. The tin was caught in the bucket of water that she pulled up.
What did you find in that tin?
Some seditious pamphlets, forged documents, letters, and some sinister schemes, and along with them a sheet of paper in Bengali with an image of Kali on it.
The idea seems to be to implicate you 5 with us Tamil revolutionaries, to suggest we are planning some large-scale subversive activities.
It is undoubtedly a conspiracy by these British spies.
Mr. Iyer has become the chief suspect in the assassination of Collector Ash. Evidently, the CID believes you arranged for the training of the assassin and thus abated the crime.
What do you suggest I do now, Mr. Ghosh?
The best course open to you is to place all this immediately before the French police and explain the entire episode to the governor.
On the same day, the investigating magistrate, the police chief and the court prosecutor came to search Sri Aurobindo's room, but found nothing incriminating in his possession.
During this period, the British CID agents in Madras gathered as much information as they could on any person who came to visit Sri Aurobindo, and unhappy consequences often followed. One such visitor was Alexandra David Neil from Paris, for whom, however, more diplomacy was used. Madame Neil, born in France in 1868, was a renowned explorer, scholar, and writer. From her early youth, she was attracted to the philosophies of the East and had a special attraction for Buddhism. In 1890, she had fulfilled her wish to travel to India and became famous for being the first European woman to enter the forbidden city of Lhasa. During her second visit to India in 1911, informed by her friend Meera that a distinguished yogin, Aurobindo Ghosh, was living in Pondicherry, she obtained his permission to meet him. She arrived in November and had a long interview with Sri Aurobindo at Raghavan House. After the meeting, she proceeded to Madras, and as soon as she stepped on the train platform, a well-dressed Englishman came forward and greeted her.
Madame Neil?
Oui, c'est moi. Do you live at Adyar? You must be a member of the Theosophical Society?
No, madam. I am the chief of police. Rather than sending my subordinate, I prefer to come myself.
Oh, okay, merci. Thank you for your courtesy. You see, no interrogation is necessary. You know quite well that I have come from Pondicherry and whom I have seen there. Is that why you are here?
I am very well aware of your case.
Regardez, these are the letters issued to me by the India office in London for the Viceroy and for the governors of the Indian provinces. I have heard of Aurobindo Ghosh as a distinguished philosopher, and it's as such that I wish to see him and speak to him.
He certainly is a remarkable scholar, but he's a dangerous man. We hold him responsible for the assassination of Mr. Ash last June.
Oh no, I have never heard of that man. He must have been an English official.
He was the collector of the Tinnavelli district.
No. It seems very improbable that the learned man who has spoken to me so knowledgeably on philosophical topics is an assassin.
He certainly did not kill him himself. He had him killed.
Oh no, vraiment. I am not at all keen to poke my nose into the activities of Indian revolutionaries.
I quite see your point of view, madam. It is nearing 5 o'clock. Can we continue this discussion in my office? In view of your nationality, your cultural background, and the various papers you have shown me, I shall try to keep this interview as painless as possible. However, I have to tell you, my report will precede you to Calcutta, where I believe you will meet the Viceroy.
Okay, merci. Thank you.
On the 14th of February 1912, Madame Neil visited the Government House in Calcutta. In the course of her conversation with senior officials, the topic of Aurobindo Ghosh again came up. She not only spoke her mind to the Viceroy's private secretary, but wrote to the Viceroy Lord Hardinge himself, whose polite reply finally laid the matter to rest. Her passage thus facilitated, Madame Neil reached Tibet without any further incident with the British authorities.
Namaskaram, Bharti Arwal.
Hayya, in spite of respectable gentlemen like yourself protecting us, are we still going to be banished from Pondicherry?
Calm down, Bharti Arwal, calm down. Tell me, what is the matter that troubles you so much?
Ayya, haven't you heard that the French government is trying to keep themselves in the right side of the British, since France may any day be invaded by Germany?
Oh, now I see what you are afraid of. The implementation of the Foreigners Act would mean your eviction, right?
Precisely. This law will now be applicable even to us.
The new clause lays down that all visitors to Pondicherry who are not French citizens will have to present a certificate from the proper authorities of their country.
Ah, I see.
It also means that in order to continue to stay here, we shall need a certificate from a British magistrate to the effect that we are bona fide Indian citizens and there are no charges against us.
In other words, if you cannot obtain a certificate of good conduct from a British magistrate, you can no longer stay here, right?
Yes.
Yes, that's right.
So, what is the alternative provided by the law?
We must produce a letter to the same effect, signed by 5 gentlemen of standing belonging to Pondicherry.
That's all? Bharti Arwal, do not worry. Obtaining the signature of honorary magistrates is not a big job, as I, Shankar Chetty, am myself one.
Good. Can this then be done today itself?
Ayya, actually it has to be registered with the French police by tomorrow evening.
Well, in 2 hours it will be done. Give me the necessary papers. I shall bring the signed documents to your residence. Now, Bharati Arwal, can you not sing a new Swadeshi song for us?
ஜயமுண்டு பயமில்லை மனமே, இந்த ஜன்மத்திலே விடுதலையுண்டு நிலையுண்டு. ஜயமுண்டு பயமில்லை மனமே, ஜயமுண்டு பயமில்லை மனமே. பயனுண்டு பக்தியினாலே, பயனுண்டு பக்தியினாலே. நெஞ்சில் பதிவுற்ற குலசக்தி சரணம், சரணுண்டு பகையில்லை. பதிவுற்ற குலசக்தி சரணுண்டு பகையில்லை. ஜயமுண்டு பயமில்லை மனமே.
In April 1913, financial stringency obliged Sri Aurobindo to move from Raghavan House to a much smaller house with a tiled roof on Mission Street, which was then called Rue des Missions Étrangères. V. Ramaswamy Iyengar of Kodiyalam returned to Pondicherry to stay with Sri Aurobindo. Soon, a cousin of Bijoy Nag, named Nagain Nag, who was suffering from tuberculosis, also came to stay with Sri Aurobindo. With Nagain came Biren Roy, his friend and attendant. In October 1913, Sri Aurobindo rented a house in Rue François Martin, which later came to be known as the guest house. Sri Aurobindo stayed here until October 1922.
Nalini, is Sri Aurobindo in his room?
Yes, you can go in.
You all must also come in with us.
Sir, war is imminent. France will certainly be invaded by the Germans, and she is negotiating with the British for a pact. In this situation, France is bound to succumb to the British demand to do something drastic about us.
And we feel that France has only two options before her. Either to round us up and hand us over to the British police, or to transport us overseas.
Yes, I feel France may consider our plight and offer to send us off to their territories in Algeria or Indochina.
We have discussed this matter amongst us, and we feel that we ought to accept that offer to be sent to one of these French colonies.
There, we can live in peace and more freedom than here. Besides, the French authorities have offered to bear the expenses of transporting us to whichever French colony we choose.
If we refuse, they may be forced to hand us over to the British, since they can't shield us any longer from the conspiracies that British spies may cook up to trap us. So we have come to find out your opinion and wish to follow your advice.
Mr. Bharati, I am not going to budge an inch from Pondicherry. I know nothing will happen to me. As for you all, you may decide what is your best option.
The Swadeshis were left with no alternative but to accept Sri Aurobindo's decision. But early in February 1914, Moni, Shorin and Nolini left for Calcutta, only to return in September. The 3rd of March 1914. Sitting in the quiet sanctuary of her room, Meera wrote,
As the day of departure draws near, I enter into a kind of self-communion. I turn with a fond solemnity towards all those 1,000 little nothings around me, which have silently, for so many years, played their role of faithful friends. And I wish that if they are destined to pass into other hands, these hands may know all the respect that is due to what thy divine love has brought out from the dark inconscience of chaos.
The next day, Meera left for Geneva, where she spent a few days before departing for India. In her communion with her Lord, she offered in prayer the pangs of separation that her friends and fellow seekers had felt as she bid them farewell.
After having suffered acutely from their suffering, I turned towards thee, trying to heal it by infusing into it a little of that divine love which is the source of all peace and all happiness. This is what I wished for them all. This is what I ardently willed for them, and that is why, assured of thy victory, certain of thy triumph, I confided their grief to thee, that by illuminating it, thou mayst heal it.
Some days later, Mira arrived at Marseille and boarded the Japanese steamship Kagamaru. In the early hours of the morning, as the ship sailed into the crystal blue of the Mediterranean, Mira wrote in her diary,
"In front of this calm sunrise, which turned all within me into silence and peace, at the moment when I grew conscious of Thee, and Thou alone wast living in me, O Lord, it seemed to me that I adopted all the inhabitants of this ship and enveloped them in an equal love, and that so in each one of them something of Thy consciousness would awake. Not often had I felt so strongly Thy divine power and Thy invincible light, and once again total was my confidence and unmixed my joyful surrender."
On the 10th of March, in the vast solitude of the starlit night, a great realization descended upon her.
In the silence of the night, Thy peace reigned over all things. In the silence of my heart, Thy peace reigns always. And when these two silences were united, Thy peace was so powerful that no disturbance of any kind could resist it. Then I thought of all those who were watching over the boat to safeguard and protect our course, and in gratefulness I wanted to make Thy peace spring up and live in their hearts. Then I thought of all those who, confident and free from care, slept the sleep of inconscience, and with solicitude for their miseries, pity for their latent suffering which would arise in them when they awoke, I wanted that a little of Thy peace might live in their hearts and awaken in them the life of the Spirit, the light that dispels ignorance. Then I thought of all the inhabitants of this vast sea, both visible and invisible, and I willed that Thy peace might spread over them. Then I thought of all those we had left far behind, and whose affection goes with us, and with a great tenderness I wanted Thy conscious and lasting peace for them, the plenitude of Thy peace as far as they could receive it. Then I thought of all those towards whom we are going, who are troubled by childish preoccupations and fight in ignorance and egoism for petty rivalries of interest, and ardently, in a great aspiration, I asked for them the full light of Thy peace.
The long journey across the Mediterranean ended at Port Said, Egypt, from where the Kagamaru slowly entered the Suez Canal, eventually anchoring at Cairo. Mira went ashore and visited the museum. In one of the showcases, there happened to be the personal belongings of the great Egyptian queen Hatshepsut. At a glance, Mira immediately recognized them to be her own. She realized she had been that great queen in a former life. Once again, the Kagamaru embarked upon its journey, now along the Gulf of Suez. Sailing past the golden river banks of vast ancient desert, Mira wrote in her diary,
"In the immutable solitude of the desert, there is something of Thy majestic presence, and I understand why one of the best means of finding thee has always been to withdraw into these immense stretches of sand. But for one who knows thee, thou art everywhere, in all things, and none of them seems more suitable than another for manifesting thee.
Crossing the biblical waters of the Red Sea, the Kagamaru entered the Gulf of Aden. And from there proceeded to cross the vast Indian Ocean on its journey to Colombo. Pure and silent nights at sea reigned. On the 24th of March, Meera wrote,
Yesterday afternoon, during those long hours of silent contemplation, I understood at last what is meant by true identification with the object of one's thought. I understood that I would need long, very long hours of contemplation to be able to perfect this realization. This is one of the things I expect from the journey to India. If indeed thou dost consider it useful for thy service, Lord, grant that I may accomplish my mission, that I may help in thy integral manifestation.
The Kagamaru finally reached Colombo harbour on the 27th of March. Small boats were bobbing up and down to ferry passengers to the shore. As Meera jumped from the ship's ladder to a waiting ferry boat, she accidentally missed a step, but managed to save herself from a fall as best as she could. Now she happened to have a gold pencil given to her by her grandmother, the great Meera Ismaloon, and she considered it to be the most precious thing in the world. She always wore it on a watch chain around her neck. But Meera's leap to safety caused the pencil to fall into the sea, and it sank right down to the bottom. At first she felt deeply troubled. But then it struck her that perhaps it was no mishap at all.
Ah, the effect of India. I am being liberated from my attachments.
Meera spent a day in Colombo, partly in the company of a noted Buddhist monk named Dharmapal. The following day, she boarded the train from Manar to Talai Manar. Later that day, she wrote,
At no moment do I feel that I am living outside thee, and never have the horizons appeared vaster to me, and the depths at once more luminous and unfathomable.
She crossed the strait from Talai Manar to Dhanushkodi on a ferry steamer. At the time, 3 steamers were in service: Elgin, Harding and Curzon, named after 3 viceroys of India. Most probably, she boarded the Curzon. She then changed over to the Madras boat mail, waiting at the Dhanushkodi pier. And here, for the first time, her feet touched Indian soil. The boat mail proceeded to Pamban, where a little over a month earlier, the Pamban Rail Bridge, India's first cantilever bridge, had just been inaugurated. From here she travelled to Mandapam and then towards Tiruchirappalli and on to Villupuram. At Villupuram Junction, Meera boarded the last train that would carry her to her final destination, reaching Pondicherry early in the morning of the 29th of March. From the station, Mira was taken to Margry's Grand Hôtel d'Europe on Rue Suffren. On that day, after a very long and tiring journey from Dhanushkodi, seated in her room at the hotel, perhaps having observed the people around her, she wrote to her Lord,
O Thou whom we must know, understand, realize, absolute consciousness, eternal law, Thou who guidest and illuminest us, who movest and inspirest us, grant that these weak souls may be strengthened and those who fear be reassured. To Thee I entrust them, even as I entrust to Thee our entire destiny.
Something in Mira wanted to meet Sri Aurobindo all alone the first time. So she started from the hotel along Rue Suffren. She reached the guest house at 3:30 in the afternoon. As the stairs wound to the right and the head of the stairs came in sight, Mira found Sri Aurobindo standing there. Everything was exactly as it was when she saw him in her vision. The same dress, the same stance, the same face in profile, the head held high. He turned his head to face her, and she saw in his eyes that it was he, her Krishna. There was a blaze of instantaneous recognition. The earlier inner experience immediately became one with the present outer experience, and there was a fusion, the decisive shock. She climbed up and prostrated before him in the Hindu manner, as she used to do in her visions.
Here first she met on the uncertain earth the one for whom her heart had come so far. The mist was torn that lay between two lives, her heart unveiled and his to find her turned, attracted as in heaven star by star, they wondered at each other and rejoiced, and wove affinity in a silent gaze. A moment passed that was eternity's ray, an hour began, the matrix of new time.
In silence, they exchanged the depths of their souls and thoughts. In silence, they spoke of the greatness of the work to be done, and of the splendor of the victory to come, of which the dazzling radiance about him seemed a glorious pledge. The meeting of the dual incarnations, the Mother and Sri Aurobindo, on the physical plane was predestined to to fulfill their mission. Their lives were shaped amidst different cultural milieus and ethos, preparing them for the great work of the transformation of human life into a life divine. The next day, 30th March, early in the morning, she noted in her diary,
"Gradually the horizon becomes distinct, the path grows clear, and we move towards a greater and greater certitude. It matters little that there are thousands of beings plunged in the densest ignorance. He whom we saw yesterday is on earth. His presence is enough to prove that a day will come when darkness shall be transformed into light, and thy reign shall be indeed established upon earth. O Lord, divine builder of this marvel, my heart overflows with joy and gratitude when I think of it, and my hope has no bounds. My adoration is beyond all words. My reverence is silent."
Later that day, Meera met Sri Aurobindo. He was sitting at his table in the veranda. She sat on the floor in front of the table, facing his small feet, almost from the moment she sat at his feet, without her knowing, without even her having asked him. Perhaps even without his trying, he put such a silence into her head that it seemed as if she no longer knew or thought or understood anything. All she was aware was of a total blank. It was as if she was born.
Some students of Calvé College were always eager to know everything about Sri Aurobindo. Prominent among them were Aramudan, Swaminathan, Krishnamachari and Subburatinam. Every evening, as soon as Subramanya Bharati reached home after his daily visit to Sri Aurobindo's house, they joined the others who assembled at Bharatiya's house for the same purpose. Always the first question was, what did Sri Aurobindo say today? Now, once a month, Bharatiyar would take these 4 boys along with his friends for an outing in the suburbs of Pondicherry.
You know, Aurobindo Babu told us that Madam Meera was born free.
What does it mean she was born free?
Subbu, it means she's a Muktatma. She's beyond all the strict observances of orthodox rites and rituals, beyond all rules and ceremonies, beyond habits and customs. She belongs to no religion. We might even say she belongs to no nation.
At their first meeting, when she spontaneously bowed down before his feet, Sri Aurobindo saw that she had surrendered to him her entire being down to the physical cells.
Yes, he told us that was the first time that he had seen such an unreserved and absolute surrender. Yes, we may compare Madam Meera's devotion to that of Radha to Sri Krishna. Sri Aurobindo had once told us that Radha is the personification of the absolute love for the divine, total and integral in all parts of the being, from the highest spiritual to the physical.
Is it true that on April 13th, Mother Meera had visited Karaikal?
Yes, that was her first direct experience of India in its crude outward aspect.
By the way, she gave us an amusing description of what she found there.
Amusing? Amusing?
Yes. What amused us a lot was her description of the room she was put up in.
It must have been decorated for her.
It must have been beautiful. No such thing. It was dark, dirty and dilapidated and infested with white ants. What?
And for the first time she visited a village where people drank the yellow muddy water of a pond which was freely used even by their cows, even when cholera raged in neighboring villages.
Truly amazing. Come, let us go before it gets dark.
Though Meera observed these appalling physical conditions of the village she visited, what she experienced inwardly was something totally different. It is that inward experience that she has described in her diary.
Everything works together to prevent me from remaining a creature of habits. And in this new state, in the midst of these circumstances so complex and unstable, I have never before so completely lived thy immutable peace, or rather, the I has never before disappeared so completely that thy divine peace alone is alive there. All is beautiful, harmonious and calm. All is full of thee, and thy name is written upon everything I see.
In June 1914, Meera left Hotel d'Europe and moved into the house at number 7 Rue du Play, the city's main street. It was very near Sri Aurobindo's house. Her new accommodation had a beautiful spacious terrace, from where she could see the small terrace in front of Sri Aurobindo's room. And it was here that she would meditate every morning, facing his room. From the time Meera was in France, she had always loved the mountains and felt a great longing to go to the Himalayas. When she was in Pondicherry, she was absolutely happy. Everything was beautiful. Everything was perfect. But oh, to be in the Himalayas, even if just for a while. Now during her meditations, she would often walk back and forth on her terrace. The terrace overlooked a small courtyard with a dividing wall upon which shards of glass were embedded to keep out thieves. One day, whilst meditating on the spiritual life, something suddenly caught her eye, a glistening ray of sunlight on a sharp piece of blue glass. Then positively, spontaneously, without thinking or reflecting or anything of the kind, the summits of the Himalayas revealed themselves before her. She found herself high upon those glorious summits. The experience lasted more than half an hour. It was a marvelous mountain scene, with fresh mountain air and the lightness of the mountains all around. The splendor of sunlight on the Himalayan peaks. After this, Meera had not the slightest wish to go there, for she had received the full spiritual experience of the Himalayas. It was a grace given to her.
The First World War was the longest and largest conflict the world had seen until then.
So you must have heard that a great war has broken out in Europe. I am sure you already know what Sri Aurobindo has to say about its causes.
Yes, but did Madame Meera tell you what she thinks of this war?
Yes. In her view, this war has been caused by monstrous occult forces that have rushed down on humanity and darkened man's vision and nature. She also feels that the horrors of the oncoming war is going to be so unthinkable that the sufferings of the soldiers can even turn them mad.
Then we can very well say that the devastating cyclone we had recently here is surely a precursor to this world calamity.
Yes, but behind this formidable disorder and terrible destruction that these hostile forces have created, Madame Meera has seen the working of a divine truth force which our human mind cannot see.
Correct. It is this truth force, she told us, that is working silently behind this vast carnage to prepare the earth for a new sowing, which will result in the birth of a new humanity.
But children, what is of real importance is that Sri Aurobindo and Madame Meera have decided to launch a journal explaining the origin, nature, and a future of this new world in all its aspects.
And the first number of this journal will come out on his birthday. They have decided to call it Arya.
Arya? Yes. The full name will be Arya, a philosophical review. I am convinced that it will sow the seeds of a new age. I am also convinced that Sri Aurobindo is the Rishi born to inaugurate it.
You see, this world is an unhealed sore, Tirada Vyadhi, in the human consciousness.
And Arya is destined to heal that sore and bring in a new life for all.
A French edition called Revue de la Grande Synthèse will also be published simultaneously. It will spread this knowledge not only in France but all French-speaking peoples.
Naturally, it will be edited by Madame Meera.
Arrangements have been made for printing it here at the Modern Press, and the offices of this review will be in Madame Meera's house in Duplex Street. She will handle all the office work that entails the publishing of both the journals herself.
And what will interest you most will be the news that Madame Meera will also be launching her own practical work on the same day.
You must tell us all about it then,
Mustn't you?
You see, she hopes to gather some of the young men here who have shown interest in Sri Aurobindo's yoga. With them, she will start a society called A New Idea.
Is it so? Then we shall be its first members.
Of course.
Of course. Madame Meera's idea is to announce its opening in a small notice in the first number of the Arya and open a reading room and a library for its members.
And she also hopes to extend branches in Karaikal and later also in Yanam and Mahe.
This time, Sri Aurobindo's birthday on the 15th of August was celebrated more openly. It was commemorated with the publication of the first issue of the Arya in both English and French.
September the 5th, 1914. It was early days of the First World War. Meera was staying in Dupleix House. That day, Meera was in her room, looking out at Sri Aurobindo's room through a small window. She was in open-eyed meditation when the black Kali appeared before her. Kali, who takes great pleasure in destruction.
What do you want?
Paris is taken! Paris will be destroyed!
No, Paris will not be taken. Paris will be saved.
When Meera said to Kali, "No," the German armies, which were till then advancing with no enemy in sight, suddenly stopped. And assuming that the Allied forces were planning an ambush, they swiftly retreated. During this time, an occult intimation had come to Sri Aurobindo to stop the German advance. He looked at the map and actually saw the place where they were then camped and sent his force. It had its effect.
It soon became clear that, as a French citizen, Meera would have to return to France due to government regulations which came into force during the war. In spite of her commitments to the Arya and the L'Idée Nouvelle, the decision had to be taken to go. In her prayers, one finds expressions of her anguish, but also of her unquestioning surrender to her Lord in trustfulness and readiness to accept whatever might come to her. In 1915, Meera's birthday, 21st February, was celebrated modestly. The next day, she left for France. Till the very last moment, she was eagerly waiting for a hint from Sri Aurobindo that after her departure, the entire burden of bringing out the Arya will fall on him. Then she would have stayed back without caring for the consequences. But Sri Aurobindo said nothing, even when she made her pranam to him, saying, "So, I'm leaving." All he said was, "All right." Before leaving Pondicherry, Meera placed her psychic in Sri Aurobindo's care. She knew how to do it. When her ship, the Kamumaru, anchored at Colombo, the British police confiscated the Sanskrit grammar that Sri Aurobindo had prepared for her. Meera left Colombo on February 26th. On March 3rd, 1915, she wrote in her diary,
Solitude, a harsh, intense solitude, and always this strong impression of having been flung headlong into a hell of darkness. I cannot prevent my total submission from taking on a hue of melancholy, and the calm and mute converse with my master within is transformed for a moment into an invocation that almost supplicates. O Lord, what have I done that Thou hast thrown me thus into the sombre night? But immediately The aspiration rises, still more ardent. Spare this being all weakness. Suffer it to be the docile and clear-eyed instrument of thy work, whatever that work may be.
Mira arrived in Paris on March 18, 1915. Witnessing some of the poignant scenes as the wounded arrived at a railway junction to be put aboard the ambulance train, Mira later wrote,
I have visited trains, each one bringing between 500 and 600 wounded from the front. It is a moving sight, not so much because of all that these unfortunate men are suffering, but above all because of the noble manner in which most of them bear their sufferings. Their soul shines out through their eyes. The slightest contact with the deeper forces awakens it, and from the intensity, the fullness of the power of true love which could, in their presence, be manifested in perfect silence, it was easy to realize the value of their receptivity.
About 10 million dead and twice that number wounded is a conservative estimate. Starvations and epidemics raise that number. Not desiring to stay in war-embattled Paris, with all the ominous quiet on the Western Front and the hell-hole trenches not many miles away, Mira retired to more peaceful Lunel in the south of France. In Lunel, she had a serious breakdown. The doctor gave up all hope. Then, with an intense effort, she wrote out a letter to Sri Aurobindo. The next morning, the pain was gone. It took several months to build up the lost health. On 6th May 1915, Sri Aurobindo wrote to her,
But is not the whole world and not Europe only in a state of decomposition? In any case, an effective retirement does not seem to be my destiny. I must remain in touch with the world until I have either mastered adverse circumstances or succumbed, or carried on the struggle between the spiritual and physical, so far as I am destined to carry it on. One needs to have a calm heart, a settled will, entire self-abnegation, and the eyes constantly fixed on the beyond, to live undiscouraged in times like these, which are truly a period of universal decomposition. For myself, I follow the voice and look neither to right nor to left of me. The result is not mine, and hardly at all now even the labor.
On another occasion, Sri Aurobindo wrote to her on 20th May,
Heaven we have possessed, but not the earth. But the fullness of the yoga is to make in the formula of the Veda, heaven and earth equal and one.
This statement is reflected in Mira's prayer of 31st July, written at Marseilles.
O Lord, the heavens are definitely conquered, and nothing and nobody could have the power of wresting them from me. But the conquest of the earth is still to be made. It is being carried on in the very heart of the turmoil.
By November 1915, she had returned to Paris.
February 28th, 1916. Mira decided to go to Japan. Knowing the financial difficulty of Sri Aurobindo's household, shortly before leaving for Japan, Meera sent Shorin the capital funds to start a business and trade unit. This is how in September 1916 the shop Aryan Stores was opened in the bazaar on Rue du Play. Sri Aurobindo attended its opening. The Japanese passenger ship Kamumaru was plying between England and Japan, so Meera first travelled to London, where a large number of formalities had to be completed before she could board the ship. On the 11th of March, Meera boarded the Kamumaru and set sail for Japan. It was the same ship that had brought her from Colombo to France a year earlier. Now, due to the war, it was to sail via the Cape of Good Hope, a journey that would take her around the entire western coast of Africa, making it a 52-day journey. The atmosphere on board was rather oppressive. One had nothing to do most of the time. There was thick mist during the day, and one could not even read at night due to the strict blackout that had to be observed to avoid being spotted by enemy aircraft. Distractions were so few that one evening, when the fog cleared, everyone was delighted simply to catch a glimpse of the crescent moon. But with her entire consciousness immersed in the contemplation of the divine, Meera's whole being enjoyed a supreme and vast felicity throughout. Almost a month later, the ship anchored in Table Bay, Cape Town. From here, Meera sent a postcard to her son, André, telling him how she was going about visiting the city by tram. The next port of call was Shanghai, China. Meera visited both the French and the native quarters of the city.
Let the eternal light dawn on the eastern horizon.
On the 18th of May, the Kamumaru arrived at its final destination, Yokohama, Japan. Meera was deeply struck by the Japanese sense of physical and natural beauty. She recounted, "For 4 years, from an artistic point of view, I lived from wonder to wonder. Beauty rules over Japan as an incontestable master. These landscapes of Japan, well, almost all the most beautiful, striking ones, I had seen in vision in France, and yet I had not seen any pictures or photographs of Japan. I knew nothing of Japan. And I had seen these landscapes without human beings, nothing but the landscape, quite pure, like that. And it seemed to me that they were visions of a world other than the physical. They seemed to me too beautiful for the physical world, too perfectly beautiful.
Let the supreme beauty be manifest in this land of beauty so close to my heart.
It was the beginning of January 1919. A terrible pandemic, commonly called the Spanish flu, raged throughout the whole of Japan. Hundreds of thousands lost their lives. In Tokyo itself, hundreds of cases occurred every single day. It was in this atmosphere of gloom that 5 of Mira's friends, Kato, Goto, Takeshi, Hirasawa, and Hayashi, met one day to discuss the situation.
Isn't it remarkable that for the last 2 or 3 days there has not been a single new case of the disease here in Kyoto? And even more interesting is that those who had taken ill due to it have been cured. And the number of deaths has suddenly dropped to negligible.
Yes, it now seems all over.
Ah, Mr. Hayashi, Mr. Hirasawa, please have a seat. Ohayou gozaimasu.
Ohayou gozaimasu.
Ohayou gozaimasu. It is also reported that the illness is wholly under control all over Japan. But do you really know the underlying reason for it?
Underlying reason? Is there one?
What is it?
You know, our friend Madam Mira too had been attacked by this particular illness.
Are you then saying that what we suspected to be the real reason is in fact true?
If so, it is certainly the most remarkable thing. For a week or so, Madam Mira was completely bedridden, and she had asked all to leave her alone.
She remained in her bed all that time. She passed those days in absolute quiet, fully concentrated in her unfathomable consciousness. Today, we meant to meet her at her residence and came to know the secret of a victory over the fatal disease.
In fact, she herself narrated the whole story of how this happened to pass.
Would you not tell us that secret, please?
Sure. A week back, she was called to the other end of the city by a young woman who wished to introduce her to some friends and show her certain things. She had to cross the entire city in a tram car. While in that tram, she saw all those people masking their noses to prevent infection.
She noticed the constant fear that filled the whole atmosphere.
Indeed, it was so everywhere.
Then a suggestion came to her, and she asked herself, truly, what is this illness? What are the forces that are behind this illness?
And then?
Well, with that suggestion that had come to her inside the tram, she crossed the city and reached the friend's house. She spent an hour there and returned home with a terrible, terrible fever.
So that is how she got it?
Yes, just being unprepared. She had caught it instantaneously.
Oh yes, that is how it comes.
You receive a letter and open the envelope and hop, puff!
The next minute you have the fever.
Tell us what happened next, Mr. Hayashi.
The doctor was called immediately.
But it was not she who called the doctor.
Anyhow, what happened when the doctor came?
The doctor told her, I must absolutely give you this medicine. It is one of the best medicines for this fever. I have just a little left. Everyone is being given this. Our stock is practically exhausted. I still have these few packets from which I am going to give you some. But she told him, I beg of you, doctor, do not give it to me. I will just not take it.
The doctor was annoyed and told her, so it was no use of my coming here.
And she quietly replied, that is how it seems, doctor. You will please forgive me?
And so she went on suffering that fever?
With all its violent reactions?
Yes, but you see, all that while she was trying to find out what the illness actually was, how it had turned into an epidemic, and what was the real cause behind its coming. And then, at the end of the second day, as she was alone in her room, she saw a being with a part of its head cut off, in a military uniform or the remains of a military uniform, approaching her and suddenly flinging himself upon her chest with that half a head, trying to suck her force.
And then she took a good look at him and realized that she was about to die.
She seemed to have been nailed to her bed and rendered immobile, as if in a trance. All that time, the being was drawing out her life.
And then she called upon her occult powers and put up a big fight.
And succeeded in turning the being back?
Yes, it turned around and disappeared.
After that, she came out of her trance.
So these types of illnesses originate from such beings?
Yes, there were many other beings capable of starting such devastating epidemics.
There were other such interesting facts that she narrated to us.
I suggest we publish articles about this in the papers.
Yes, we must certainly do that.
For the latter 3 years of her stay in Japan, Mira lived mainly in the beautiful city of Kyoto, the former capital of Japan. Her closest friend there was Madame Noboko Kobayashi.
Dozo, dozo.
Shichuri shimasu.
I am honored to receive you, Mr. Hirasawa Techo and Mr. Hayashi, two of our well-known poets and artists.
We have come specially to meet you and talk about Madame Mira, who was held in a very high esteem by all of us.
We would be grateful if you tell us something about her.
I have a strong feeling that her higher power was guiding her life. She seemed to live in a world of her own, with its own laws and correspondences and exaltations.
We shall treasure what you have just told us about her inner life.
Please tell us something about your relation with her.
She came here to learn Japanese and be one of us, but we had so much more to learn from her, and her charming and unpredictable ways. She was a sweet friend, an artist to her fingertips. I have treasured to this day her sketch of me, and the miniature on ivory which she presented to me. She also painted an oil portrait of me when I was in my room preparing some medicine. I have seen her oil painting of you, Mr. Hirasawa, that she did in a single sitting, and the sketch she did of you, Mr. Hayashi. Do you know that she used to meditate with me in her attic? We sat together and explored our inner depths, each in our own way. She made me realize that we thought the same thoughts and saw the same vision.
Can you tell us what she felt about her culture and history?
She said that Japan is in the physical world the teacher of beauty, because Japanese art teaches unity of art with life.
How true. She found in Japan the vitality and concentrated energies of a nation which has not yet reached its zenith. That, she told us, is one of the most interesting features of Japan. It is visible everywhere, in everyone.
Along with their perfect love for nature and beauty, she said this accumulated strength is perhaps the most distinctive and widely spread characteristic of the Japanese.
The true Japanese, she felt, have kept untouched the righteousness and bravery of the ancient samurai. That in truth is Japan, the secret of her force.
Once in the spring, we went for a walk along a country road. The rains brightened the yellow mustard and green barley sown close to each other in the fields. Then we saw a group of children in Western-style clothes being escorted to school by their mothers in kimonos. Charmed by the scene, she exclaimed, "We could very well call Japan the paradise of children." She loved the beautiful Fuji flowers trailing down the roof of the Kasuga Shrine and Nara. She even gave herself a name after them, Fujiko.
And what did she say about the national flower, the cherry blossom?
Oh, that! I will share a secret with you. 2 years ago, on April 7, she had a beautiful experience that she shared with me after noting it down in her diary.
A deep concentration seized on me, and I perceived that I was identifying myself with a single cherry blossom, then through it with all cherry blossoms. And as I descended deeper in the consciousness, following a stream of bluish force, I became suddenly the cherry tree itself, stretching towards the sky like so many arms, its innumerable branches laden with their sacrifice of flowers. Then I heard distinctly this sentence: "Thus hast thou made thyself one with the soul of the cherry trees. And so thou canst take note that it is the divine who makes the offering of this flower prayer to heaven."
She once accompanied me to a cherry dance performance in the Minamiza Theatre. This is a dance to welcome spring. It is performed every year by geishas from the famous Gyeong Quarter in this ancient capital of Japan, from 1st of April until the 10th of May.
Madam, can you take us to the house in which she lived here?
Come, I will take you there. It will take just a few minutes. There was a steep and narrow staircase that led to the second floor. There was a small living room in which she used to meditate. I too have meditated with her in that room.
This house might have been called a laboratory in which Mira's mission was shaped before she made India her permanent home. The 4 years in Japan had proved a sanctuary and phoenix hour for the whole tapasya of her Mahasaraswati's aspect. It was 3rd September 1919. Mother was living in a Japanese country house near a lake in Oiwake. The word Oiwake means a fork in the road, and indeed this particular day became a turning point in her own inner road. That day, when she was sitting alone in meditation, there was an abrupt concentration of consciousness. In fact, there was a sudden ingathering of the entire body, and she realized that the Lord's power was plainly there. Everything in her became still. The whole external being was completely immobilized, and she had a vision of the ineffable Supreme whose presence she felt physically. Then, that immensity seemed to have reduced itself into a gigantic being who lifted her up like a wisp of straw, and gathering her up in its arms, turned towards India and offered her to Sri Aurobindo, whom she could see at the other end of the vision. Without a word, without anything else, the Supreme offered her to Sri Aurobindo. Then everything vanished. That day she wrote in her diary,
"Since the man refused the meal I had prepared with so much love and care, I invoked the God to take it. My God, Thou hast accepted my invitation. Thou hast come to sit at my table, and in exchange for my poor and humble offering, Thou hast granted to me last liberation. My body smiles to Thee with happiness, as before my soul smiled to Thee. Nothing remains of the past but a potent love which gives me the pure heart of a child and the lightness and freedom of thought of a God."
Later, she explained the inner meaning of this prayer. In this prayer, it is the Universal Mother, in the form of material terrestrial nature, who is speaking. The meal is the world that she has brought out of the inconscient by the process of evolution. She wanted to make man the summit of this evolution, the ruler of this world. Throughout the ages, she has waited, hoping that man would become fit to fulfill his role and give the divine realization to the world. But man was so unfit that he was not even willing to submit to the conditions needed to prepare himself for the task. And material nature, finally convinced that she was on the wrong track, turned directly to the divine and asked him to take possession of this world that had been prepared for the divine realization. The next day she began to prepare to return to India. She wrote in her diary,
"I belong to no nation, no civilization, no society, no race, but to the divine. I obey no master, no ruler, no law, no social convention, but the divine. To Him I have surrendered all. Will, life, self. For Him I am ready to give all my blood, drop by drop, if such is His will, with complete joy. And nothing in His service can be sacrifice, for all is perfect delight.
In March 1920, despite the protests of the British government, she obtained the visa and other necessary documents with the help of the Japanese government. This time, she boarded the ship Kagamaru from the port of Kobe. Her friends had come to see her off. Later she wrote,
Japan was in the physical world, the teacher of beauty. She must not renounce her privilege.
The first year of Mira's stay in Japan was spent for the most part in Tokyo, in the house of Dr. Shumi Akawa and his wife.
Dozo, dozo.
Ohayou gozaimasu.
Your student Kato is here.
Ozamasimasu.
Kato? Harai tamai. Kato, we meet after a long time. Is everything all right with you? How is your work going on?
I'm perfectly all right, master. My work is most satisfactory. Madam, I have heard that Madam Mira has left Japan.
Yes, my child. The ultimate mission of her life awaits her there in India.
Yes. We first met some years back when Asia was rising and hope and confidence filled our hearts. One day, an Indian came to our city and spoke about Indian philosophy. I was one of the fortunate 50 to attend his lecture. And I noticed that among us there was a young French lady whose very presence, call it grace, call it the immutable light or the magnetism of the polar star, whatever you call it, it stirred me to the depths and I was drawn irresistibly to her. I saw a light in her eyes. I was mechanically listening to that man's lecture. But my soul was drawn into the silence of her depths, and I strained to catch a glimpse of the vastness of her soul.
How did you eventually meet, master?
The next morning I met the lecturer, and to my surprise he said the lady herself wanted to meet me. A thrill ran down the very roots of my heart.
Ah, so is that how you two met?
I met her as a brother and a friend and was privileged to assist her in her work. In those days, she and her friends dreamt of a new Asia, a new world.
We were fortunate to have her living in our house for a whole year. We meditated together every night for an hour. While we practiced Zen, she practiced her yoga. But you see, the two paths lead to the same mountain heights.
Madam, could you please tell me something about your relation with Mira?
She was one of those blessed spirits that one learns to love heart and soul. She came from the far-off land of France, but it was my feeling that she was all along, like me, a daughter of Japan. I could swear that she was my very sister whenever she wore a kimono. Great was my surprise when in those days she was living with us. She had drawn a beautiful painting of mine one summer when she stayed with us in Kyoto. And when she left us, there was a mist in my eyes, like the autumnal mist that hangs over Tokyo and the ocean around.
Master, do tell me, what struck you most about her?
What struck me most was her will, powerful enough to move mountains. And her mind was sharp as the edge of the finest sword. Her thought was clarity itself, and her resolve stronger than the roots of a giant oak. Her mystic depths were deeper than the ocean, but her intellect could fathom its depths. An artist, she painted pictures of an unearthly loveliness. A musician, she enchanted my soul whenever she played on the organ or the guitar. A scientist, she could formulate a new heaven and earth, a new cosmology.
And what did you think about her vision, Master?
You see, she was my sister. How could I assess her vision or measure her spirit? Distance alone can ensure descriptions from these points of view. How could I, living in the heart of Fujiyama, speak about the volume of its fire and flame, or the dimensions of its light?
I understand, Master. I am very grateful, Master and Madam. Thank you. I will have to leave now. I have to catch the bus.
I am sorry I cannot see you properly. I am losing my sight. But I am very happy that you have come and I could share my feelings about her with you after such a long time.
We both wish you all the best in your life, my child.
I am most grateful, Master and Madam.
Kato is so very dedicated to you and still has such a great respect and love for Mira.
Yes, indeed. His coming here has rekindled her presence with us.
The Kagamaru reached Colombo on 18th April 1920. Since the British ambassador in Japan had refused to give her the permission to cross British India on her way to Pondicherry, she had chosen to travel by the Juplé. This was the same ship in which Sri Aurobindo had arrived at Pondicherry a decade earlier on 4th April 1910. While the ship was some miles from Pondicherry, the mother had an experience which she recounted decades later to the children of the ashram.
I was on the boat at sea, not expecting anything. I was of course busy with the inner life, but I was living physically on the boat, when all of a sudden, abruptly, about 2 nautical miles from Pondicherry, the quality, I may even say the physical quality of the atmosphere, of the air, changed so much that I knew we were entering the aura of Sri Aurobindo. It was a physical experience. I had been for a very long time and continuously in spiritual contact, if I may say so, with the atmosphere of Sri Aurobindo. But I had never thought of the possibility of a modification in the physical air, and I was not expecting it in the least. And it was this that gave the whole value to the experience, which came like that, quite suddenly, just as one enters a place with another temperature or another altitude.
Around 8:30 on the morning of 24th April 1920, the Juplé anchored off the port of Pondicherry. That very day, the mother met Sri Aurobindo in the same house that they had first met on 29th March 1914.
I was standing just beside Sri Aurobindo, both gazing out through the open window, and then together at exactly the same moment we felt now the realization will be accomplished, that the seal was set and the mission was accomplished. I felt the divine power descending massively within me with the same certainty as I had felt it in my previous vision of the Supreme in Japan. From that moment on, there was nothing to say, no words, nothing. We knew it was that, the Supreme Tat.
For the rest of her life, she never left Pondicherry, working there as Sri Aurobindo's force to manifest in its plenitude what he wanted to achieve. For without the Mother, Sri Aurobindo's conception of a divine life upon earth could not have been realized.
She is the golden bridge, the wonderful fire. The luminous heart of the unknown is she, a power of silence in the depths of God, the might of all that never yet came down. Once seen, his heart acknowledged only her.
The Mother's return was the tangible sign of the sure victory over the adverse forces. Years later, Sri Aurobindo clarified,
"The Mother is not a disciple of Sri Aurobindo. She has had the same realization and experiences as myself. She had helped and is helping to give a concrete form to my yoga. This would not have been possible without her cooperation."
And the Mother announced,
"Without him, I exist not. Without me, he is unmanifest."
Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Aurobindaya. Om Anandamayi Chaitanyamayi Satyamayi Parame